what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is the last day of the month of July 31st, here on a Wednesday, to bring you guys another great show around the NFL. Got some stories here for you guys on today's menu to go over some contract talks, some holdouts, and just some situations, some positional switches that we're going to get to on today's show. Like I mentioned, the biggest piece of news around DJ Moore getting his extension, that'll lead off the show. Then Matthew Judon, his situation, initially not holding out, then it became a hold in, then we're back to a holdout. So we're going to go through all of it, why this sort of situation kind of got a little bit negative as the days went on with Matthew Judon and the Patriots. That'll be the first part of the show, and we're going to get to the rest of the topics as we move on. But before I do start, like I always do, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments, to please use the tip and donations link that you see on your screen, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link, I'm able to see your question, read it out loud, and get your guys' thoughts on anything you'd have to say or comment about on today's show. It's a big help for the show and also this network, so we always appreciate it whenever you guys are able to use that with any questions or comments that you may have. Again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. But without further ado now, we could start on the biggest piece of news. And you know what's funny about this DJ Moore extension? Other than the fact that we got another receiver extension that wasn't really on the cards per se. I wasn't really expecting it, but it did happen. Now it is a matter of fact. It is going to happen, and it did happen. Now he stays with the Chicago Bears under contract until 2025. But what's funny about this is yesterday, as I usually do, signing off on these shows, and I hit the outro button, right? As soon as, like 2 seconds before I hit the outro button, I see a notification on my phone, and it says breaking news. I usually have it for Twitter and all these apps I have for the NFL. I see breaking news out of the corner of my eye, and I don't read it out loud, just thinking it's something else. And then I outro the show, I close it out, and it goes to the final screen there. And then I read it, and it's the breaking news that DJ Moore signs off on this contract extension. So I could have had another opportunity to break the news yesterday when it happened, but I didn't think it was actually this. I didn't think just because I didn't see it in the cards playing out like this, it wasn't something that was really talked about all offseason, but now we're here, and now we could really talk about it to kick off the show. And basically, it's a 4-year, $110 million extension for the Bears, arguably their best wide receiver, just coming off of last year. Like I said, it keeps DJ Moore with the Chicago Bears until 2029. With this new contract, he has $82.6 million guaranteed, and his salary is about $27.5 million. So it's not market setting. It doesn't put him in the range of A.J. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Justin Jefferson, but it's great for the Chicago Bears, and I'll get to that a little bit later on. But with this and what it means for the Chicago Bears, it means that DJ Moore will stay with the Chicago Bears for a longer time, it seems, than the 4 years. But technically, DJ Moore is still on that contract extension he received from the Carolina Panthers back in 2022. That extension, the one that he was currently on, had him under contract until next year, or through next year, I should say, in 2025. So once that sort of runs out, then this new 4-year deal essentially starts, and that's how it keeps him with the team until 2029. And this is also pretty historic, not in numbers-wise, but in the way that it is negotiated in terms of DJ Moore's career. Because with this new extension, DJ Moore became the first receiver in NFL history to have the first 10 years of his NFL career be guaranteed under all these contracts that he's now under. So I thought that was pretty neat. That's just a fantastic job by Moore and his representatives of making sure he has this guaranteed money. And it's not like he hasn't earned it, right? Just coming off of last year, he was definitely, before he came to the Bears, the Carolina Panthers' best player. He was the only or one of the only bright spots on that team, especially on offense. But then when you get to the Bears, you don't really know how it's going to pan out with the offense struggling. Justin Fields not really at a good spot, and he just has an absolute great year. Looking at 2023 overall, he had nearly 100 receptions. He finished with 96. He had 1,364 yards and 8 touchdowns to cap off a very solid 2023 season. And perhaps my favorite part of it, the best part overall of what DJ Moore brings, is just the health availability, just being out there on the field, because after the conclusion of 2023, he has played every game of each of the last 3 years consecutively. So that's one of the things outside of skill set and, ability and what you just bring on the field. The fact that you're relied upon and you're consistently making yourself available, keeping yourself healthy, is something I really appreciate and something I look to as making my judgment and what separates some of these guys. DJ Moore hasn't really been in that conversation of, some of these top wide receivers, because you look at the highest paid guys now, you think of Amon-Ra St. Brown getting to that next level, CeeDee Lamb really stepping into that elite level. Jamar Chase has been in there, A.J. Brown also. Devontae Smith, I think, is almost talked about a little bit more than DJ Moore, but after last year, I think now more people should and will start talking about DJ Moore in more of that light, because these numbers are right up there with some of those guys in just contention stat-wise. So not only is that impressive, already in the past, establishing himself as this team, probably this team's best player, but going forward, I mentioned before how what this means for the Chicago Bears. I talked about it before. The biggest thing about this deal, the biggest piece of news that I think this deal sort of communicates to me, is that the Chicago Bears are really making a serious case going forward that they're not just a 1 to 2 year team, this sort of spark plug, catching lightning in a bottle once or twice in a lifetime sort of team, if that makes sense. They're a team that wants to stick around. They're a team that wants to turn the corner and really establish themselves as a contender, at least in the NFC North, and then as they build this thing up a little bit more, getting eventually to a point where they're competing for playoff spots, NFL divisional rounds, the playoff champion, or the conference championships, I should say. That's really what this deal says to me. They're not a team that is just going to ride out this contract with DJ Moore. They're not just going to have Keenan Allen on the team for a year or two. They might look now to extend Keenan Allen after they got this done really ahead of time. Now they could really focus in on Keenan Allen and trying to keep him as long as possible. You look at the other moves that they made, bringing in DeAndre Swift. That's on a long-term deal. Obviously, Caleb Williams is here probably forever, you'd hope, if you're a Chicago Bears fan. Rome Odunze, another player that's going to be here probably for the majority of his career. What this extension really says to me is that the Bears really are proclaiming to the NFL that they want to stick around, that they are a team that is trying to constantly be in that conversation in the NFC. And that's been the whole narrative right now around the Chicago Bears. Oh, they're exciting. This next year is going to be great because of all these weapons that they've, kind of collected. But no one's really thinking long-term, and I think that this deal really emphasizes this long-term plan that the Chicago Bears want to implement now going forward. And Ryan Poles, their general manager, big credit to him. He's done a fantastic job of building up this team. He talked about this extension on DJ Moore, and he said basically that same idea that I'm talking about a long-term plan, because he said, we all know he's an impact player and a difference maker for our offense, but his leadership and professionalism make him a cornerstone of our franchise. And when you talk about cornerstones, when you use words like that, it usually means, this piece is going to be here for the foreseeable future. They're going to help build up this project that we got going on. And I really like that. I really like hearing that, because I think this Bears team, I like seeing these rebuilds actually, pan out, like the Houston Texans, sort of like the Los Angeles Rams a little bit, making that trade. There's others I'm not, bringing up. The Jaguars you can throw in there, the Colts also. I really like seeing these things build out, and I think the Bears have gone through it the right way. And now, sticking with DJ Moore here just before I close out this segment, he joins a list of already 10 wide receivers to have gotten extended already this season, at least by my count. So it just screams to the bigger issue around, I guess, the NFL, that really, it shows how much these teams are valuing the wide receiver position, because, like I said, this DJ Moore extension wasn't really something that was on the cards, but because of how the landscape is shifting a little bit towards these receivers getting these massive deals, teams are now valuing them almost as much as quarterbacks, pass rushers, so they want to get these deals done, and you can see it by the amount of receivers that have already locked down extensions this offseason, and it still looms over Brandon Ayuk, what's going to happen with him, what's going to happen with CeeDee Lamb, because those guys are definitely guys you want to keep around as cornerstones like DJ Moore is for the Chicago Bears. But overall, great decision. I love that they did this almost like ahead of time, like I said, keeping this partnership with Caleb Williams and DJ Moore going for the rest of Caleb's career, hopefully. Crazy to think that DJ Moore's only 27, so he hasn't really gotten to his absolute best, I think. I think there's still a year or two before he has kind of plateaued. I think he could still get better, and he's got a great opportunity to do it now, leading this team, being a great weapon for Caleb Williams, having Caleb as that franchise quarterback. I'm really excited to see the Chicago Bears. I think most people will too. They're really going to be competitive, I feel like, because not only do they have the offensive playmakers now, obviously, but that defense is one of the more underrated ones. So overall, big credit to the Chicago Bears, DJ Moore for earning this contract, and Ryan Poles. He definitely should be praised a little bit more for the job that he's done with the Bears, but it all, of course, depends on how you execute this season. It all depends on how you perform this year, so we'll have to see and wait for those results. But for the meantime, congratulations to DJ Moore for getting that contract extension. But with that being said, that'll wrap up this segment. We're going to head to our first break of the show, but when we return, we're going to touch on that situation around another contract situation with Matthew Judon and the New England Patriots, how it started off pretty positively, but now has kind of turned a little bit sour with the relationship between Judon and the Patriots organization members. We're going to get into how we got to where we are right now and what it means for the New England Patriots going forward. So stick around. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now to jump back into another segment on some more contract talks, talking some more extensions, this time with the New England Patriots. But before I jump into fully this next topic, Anthony, thanks for joining the show. And to answer your question, do you feel this might be an overpay just a little bit for a one-dimensional type of receiver who just relies on the speed, is not known for his route running? That's a good question. I think that's a lot. That's one thing that can be brought up when talking about an extension for DJ Moore. And there's a few things I will say just on that is the fact that, he was kind of buried with the Carolina Panthers. Not many people really realized the talent that he was there with Carolina because he just didn't have the opportunity to show it. He kind of got to express himself a little bit more in Chicago with a better team. But the reason I wouldn't say it's an overpay, just because with this new extension, he is the 7th highest paid receiver in the NFL. So it's not like he jumped up right behind Justin Jefferson or right in the conversation with A.J. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown. If he got over $30 million or around that margin, I would say maybe there would be some hesitation there from me. Maybe you could point out the fact that the $82.6 million guaranteed is, you know, only right behind Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown in terms of guaranteed money. That could be something that you could point out to, because that's ultimately a lot, which is what matters. But I wouldn't say it's an overpay. I think he's done a good job with the Chicago Bears and how valuable he was just coming off of last year too. He kind of had that leverage, so I would say that. Isn't Tyreek Hill the highest paid receiver in the league? It's actually Justin Jefferson now. He earns $35 million per year. He got extended this offseason. Tyreek was last offseason, I want to say he got his deal at $30 million per year as an average salary. But yeah, just this offseason it's been crazy with how many receivers have jumped Tyreek. And now there's, you know, a new hierarchy, new top 5 highest paid. So that's where the receiver market is. It's kind of hard to keep up with, honestly, just because of the amount of extensions that there's been. But jumping now into this new segment, as you guys read, Matthew Judon holding in and holding out of Patriots training camp, because it's kind of developed into that now as we head into this week, because you'd have to go back to Monday, or actually even before that, when there was when the Patriots were kind of just getting together for training camp right at the start. Matthew Judon was present. He said he wasn't going to hold out. He said that he tried that last year and it just didn't feel right with the kind of person that he was. So he was there, and it seemed like this was going to be an amicable situation in terms of how the Patriots and Judon were going to go about this. But on Monday now, this past Monday, the New England Patriots had their first padded practice. And while Judon said those comments the week prior to this week, with pads coming on now, you saw Matthew Judon not participating, and he was sitting on the sideline, you know, in a sweatshirt and just sweats, and not really taking part in any sort of drills or anything like that with the Patriots. And that's a little bit weird, right? Something I wasn't expecting, just because it seemed the way he was talking just a few days before Monday, how this seemed to have been going in a better direction, a more friendlier, at a compromise sort of way, that the Patriots and Judon were going to sort this entire thing out. But the pads come on, and now he's not participating. And that's an avenue, that's a strategy that I thought he should have taken right from the start. You know, he's going to make around $6.5 million as a base salary this year. And he is over the age of 30, but I still value him at obviously more than $6.5 million. But that's just what his current contract situation is at. And I just felt that he would have held out or held in right from the get-go. But because he was pretty open about being there at the practice already, it was kind of confusing now for him not to participate once the pads come on. But that was one thing. And then you have some footage from Patriots reporters, from media members that were at practice all throughout this week. And then we start to get into the more negative side of how this whole thing has unraveled. Because from that practice on Monday, when Judon was just sitting out of it, there was some footage that came out between head coach Jerod Mayo and Matthew Judon. Basically, because I can't show it, obviously, Jerod Mayo kind of goes over to Matthew Judon, sitting on one of the trash cans on the side, and just starts talking to him. It seems a little bit serious, not something that they're just kind of like messing around. It seems like they're talking about a pretty serious topic. You could only speculate that talking about his contract or something like that, or just maybe his body language or something like that, making sure that it doesn't rub off on any of the other guys. But they were having a pretty serious conversation by the looks of it, and that lasted a good 10 to 15 minutes before their conversation ended, and Matthew Judon looked to be just walking off of the field after that, and that already doesn't look great. But then you have Karen Gurigan, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm sorry if I butchered her last name. She's a Patriots columnist for Mass Live Sports, and she tweeted after that exchange between Jerod Mayo and Matthew Judon that Matthew Judon did walk off the field after that, but he was heading towards the Patriots general manager, but not general manager by title, Elliot Wolf. He walked over to him, and they had a little conversation as well after a 15-minute conversation that he just had with Jerod Mayo. So those two things happening back-to-back kind of raised some antennas there as to what the relationships were between Judon and how the the atmosphere around these negotiations kind of were at that point. Then, to add on to that, Greg A. Bernard sort of reported after, this footage and just the atmosphere around the Patriots training camp, his idea on what he believes could be the issue here with Matthew Judon now and what could have changed to lead to this change in behavior now with Judon. He said that Matthew Judon might be starting to think that the Patriots are gonna give the extension to Devon Godcho, their nose tackle, defensive tackle, who is also looking for a new deal. Judon may start to believe that the Patriots are going to almost prioritize his contract extension before they get to him, and leaving him essentially as the last contract still left to be ironed out. And that obviously doesn't make Judon happy. Almost, I don't want to say envious, just because I don't know that for sure, but if you look at how everybody else is getting paid, how your teammates are getting paid, how lucrative the deals are for pass rushers, and now you're one of two contracts left, and they decide to extend the other guy, Devon Godcho, it could leave you feeling a sort of way now towards the Patriots, and looking at them like what's good, like what's going on with this situation. I thought I was valued a lot higher than this, and but to the Patriots' defense a little bit, with the situation going on with Christian Barmore, their best defensive lineman, same position as Devon Godcho, pretty much. It does make sense now that he is out indefinitely with blood clots that they would want to prioritize Godcho, just as an immediate replacement there for Christian Barmore. But regardless of that, according to Greg A. Bernard, that's what could have changed, what could lead to Matthew Judon feeling a bit salty about the whole situation now. And like I said, Judon, because he is scheduled to make $6.5 million in base salary in his final year, it's not an ideal situation. You want to protect yourself and not be in padded practices in case you do get hurt and you're still not getting paid guaranteed money or even a lot of money at that in the final year of your contract. And, Matthew Judon voiced his displeasure a little bit last week and how basically it's tough seeing everybody else get paid, his teammates getting paid, everybody except him getting paid. And, it's not a great situation. But again, to sort of play both sides here, not pick a winner per se right now, the Patriots also, you look at their situation and what they have laid out in front of them with Matthew Judon. His age remains a question at 31 years old. And then do you really want to extend him until he's 34, 35 years old, potentially, with a 3-year or 4-year deal, depending on how much he views his value at? Coming off of 2023, where he missed 13 games with a torn bicep, so how is he going to look? How much is he really going to contribute to this team that I think now is just entering a new era with Gerard Mayo, with a bunch of new players, young energy around everything? Maybe they just want to completely start fresh, completely reset everything. That could be a mindset. That could be where they're heading towards as to why, they don't want to just keep Judon just for the fact that he is good. He is a valuable player, but there are certainly doubts there that could cause them to pause a lot during these negotiations. And to, again, go back to Judon, he was recently a guest on the Shut Up Mark podcast over the offseason, I should say. And he had a quote basically summing up his true feelings on how he feels about everything. He said, "I don't want to be the bad guy, but it's like, shoot, bro, help me out. We got the most cap in the league right now, bro. Plain and simple." And that's really what it boils down to. You add on the fact that he mentions and he brings up the cap space that the Patriots have, almost like doing him a solid for all the good years that he has produced for the Patriots, being arguably one of their best players overall on that side of the ball. You don't want to throw him like a pity bone or something like that, but you'd want to, scratch his back for doing everything that he has put into the Patriots and all the production. I want to say he was an All-Pro or a Pro Bowler a few years ago, so, it's not like he was just kind of coasting and being average. He was really a great player for the Patriots, so that's where Judon's feelings are right now, almost feeling, not appreciated by the Patriots at this point. And it is a situation where you can see both sides of it, but I just feel like at this point, there was also the fact that Judon said on that podcast, the Shut Up Mark podcast, he said that he even presented the Patriots with a contract offer of his own to them to kind of, get the chains moving here a little bit. And the Patriots still, after that, there hasn't been much progress. I'll say that, and I'll correct that actually, because I think I saw today that the Patriots have offered him a contract extension or have offered him something at least out there. I don't know specifically what it was. I just saw that it was reported that the Patriots did offer him something over the last few days. So maybe they get something figured out or it just becomes more of the same thing. But overall, I think that the Patriots have pretty much shown their level of urgency at this point in time to kind of extend Matthew Judon or not extend him. So almost to a point where you got to read the writing on the wall and accept the fact that it's just not going to happen. Now, does that mean that Matthew Judon holds out the entire season or something like that? I don't think that would benefit him too much because there's already questions about his age. He might have to swallow his ego a little bit, play out this year, play very well, and then you can impress some teams next year. And if the Patriots really still don't value you or don't change their mind after you have a great season, hopefully, then maybe another team values you. Maybe another team sees that you performed well, and they'll give you a 2-year, 1-year deal or something like that, and you could prove yourself just this year in 2023. But to me, it's not looking like it'll get done, but, anything could still happen. Maybe Matthew Judon takes less with this new contract offer that the Patriots have reportedly giving him, but we'll see. That's just how it all has broken down right now, taking more of a sour route. He was there, willing to participate, then he was holding in, and then on Tuesday, he just didn't even show up to the Patriots facility. So he could be holding out right now, forcing the hand of the Patriots. We'll see if anything comes of this or if Matthew Judon rejects this new offer and really this is heading towards a divorce after this upcoming year. But we'll keep tabs on it. We'll surely touch on it once there is a resolution later on this year. But we're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, 2 new topics to get to on Kirk Cousins, sort of clearing the air on how everything broke down with the Minnesota Vikings, some of the factors that played into his decision to sign with the Atlanta Falcons, and also James Bradberry talking about changing over to safety, why it was his choice to do that, not the other way around, not the Eagles suggesting that he should change because of a very disappointing 2023 season. We're going to get to those 2 and what James Bradberry said, as well as what Kirk Cousins said on those topics when we return in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back here now on the show, on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, to kind of revisit a topic on Kirk Cousins. And obviously now he is on the Atlanta Falcons. That is all wrapped up and sealed. But the issue beforehand, was this negotiation process that was going on between him and the Minnesota Vikings. And after reports, it appeared that, to me, that the biggest issue was going to be the guaranteed money, the long-term deal, and whether or not the Vikings were comfortable with Kirk Cousins after that severe injury to give him a 4-year, 5-year deal after that. And ultimately, they weren't. It led to Kirk Cousins hitting the market, signing a massive 4-year, $180 million deal with the Falcons, $100 million guaranteed for Kirk Cousins. So that's awesome for him. But then it got a little bit weird, awkward, you could say, when the Falcons drafted Michael Penix so high at number 8 overall, and which led to Kirk Cousins reportedly feeling disappointed in his mind because the Falcons didn't really communicate that to him with an adamant amount of time before they ended up doing it. So it's ironic because before that, and this is sort of the main topic of this segment, before that, some reports came out by Sports Illustrated back in May when everything was sort of going down with this, that a reason why Kirk decided to move on, and they made it seem like it was the main reason, it was because Kirk had a discussion with the Minnesota Vikings, and they essentially told them that there was a real possibility that they were going to draft his successor, essentially, in this year's upcoming draft, and that, or they were going to do that even if he decided to re-sign with them. That was essentially what Sports Illustrated was basically saying as a main factor as to why Kirk decided to move on. And it's ironic, right? Because Sports Illustrated was saying that, so he signed with the Falcons, right? But they essentially did the same thing, except they just didn't communicate it to him. They didn't tell him that they were going to do that. So that was the ironic part about it. But now Kirk Cousins appeared on the Athletics Scoop City podcast to sort of explain what really happened and clear up that report by Sports Illustrated, to talk about what really happened, how that conversation went with Kevin O'Connell, specifically the Vikings head coach, and how that was one factor, but it might not have been the deciding factor in how this all played out with Kirk Cousins. You can see it there on your screen. The statement that he said on the Athletics podcast, he said, "I don't think they were ready to go there yet in March. I think the reality is just that they wanted to give themselves that flexibility." And I remember Kevin's words, Kevin O'Connell that is, which I'm not going to hold them to, were, hey, if we sign you back, I would think it's very unlikely that we draft somebody. And after that, he did acknowledge that while Kevin O'Connell did say that if they did re-sign him, they might not, probably not, draft a quarterback early, he did acknowledge the fact, Kirk Cousins did, that things could change very quickly depending on how the offseason played out. So quite the opposite of what Sports Illustrated was saying. You know, Sports Illustrated reported that the Vikings told Kirk that there was a real possibility that even if they did re-sign him, they might still draft a quarterback, but Kirk is saying the opposite. They basically told him if he does re-sign, they're probably not going to do that. So that's one thing, kind of clearing up the air there on this decision. But like I said, it probably wasn't the biggest deciding factor in all of this. I didn't think it was the biggest factor to Kirk Cousins eventually leaving, because at his stage of his career, where he's playing at, and playing at a high level, to kind of give himself that leverage, he is at a point in his career where guaranteed money means a lot. And of course, guaranteed money is important at any stage of your career, but especially when you're getting older, you're more susceptible to injuries, obviously. As a quarterback, Kirk, not the most athletic guy, is in that situation now. And the guaranteed money was really, to me, why I felt that this was never going to work out. If the Vikings were holding off on it so much, to the point where they got to free agency and nothing was really moving, I just felt that, you know, that's where they were. That's the decision that they made, and it wasn't going to work out. And Kirk similarly saw the same thing kind of playing out in front of him. With this next statement, to just wrap it all up, he said, "It just felt it had been and was going to be basically 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. And I felt, yeah, maybe I do play in Minnesota for another 5 or 6 years, but it's going to be on 1 year contracts." And obviously that's not something that Kirk wants to do at this point in time. And if you think about it, going to that statement on how Kirk kind of revealed that it went down with the Minnesota Vikings, if Kirk agreed to this 1 year deal sort of structure with everything, and that would have been a big ask of the Minnesota Vikings, of Kirk Cousins, if he decided to agree with that and go along with that, after having Kevin O'Connell tell him that, yeah, maybe we're not going to draft a quarterback if you do re-sign with us, it's kind of contradicting, because if you're on a 1 year deal, it almost gives the Minnesota Vikings more of an incentive to, still draft that quarterback, even if they do re-sign you, to go against what they were saying, because you're only on a temporary deal. So it opens up the door for them a lot more to still draft a quarterback or still plan for the future, because they're not tied to you for 3 or 4 years. So even though the Vikings were saying one thing based on their actions and based on what they were offering Kirk, he took Kevin O'Connell's word, but like he said, he wasn't going to hold him to it. And based on what they were offering, you could sort of see that the Vikings weren't really believing exactly what Kevin O'Connell was saying, or they weren't at least planning for it with offering Kirk only 1-year deals. It doesn't scream that they're not going to plan for your future in, the near future. By that being said, by only offering you 1-year deal, they're saying, yeah, we want to keep you. Yeah, you're going to be good for us maybe for a year or so, but we're not really 100% in on you continuing this level for the next 3 or 4 years. So that kind of played out there. And because that was the case, Atlanta seemed like the perfect situation, right? And then we transition now to where we are now. The biggest problem, like I said, was the guaranteed money and the structure of it. I never thought Kirk was going to agree to this 1-year deal, and that's basically what he's saying. But that's why Atlanta was so appetizing to Kirk and why everybody thought this was a match made in heaven, because they needed a quarterback, they were offering the money, and because they were offering that money, why wouldn't Kirk decide to sign there? And it's not really his fault or his decision that because he signed there, he got all the guaranteed money that he wanted, but the Falcons essentially did the same thing that the Vikings were kind of planning on doing, but just not telling Kirk, essentially. The Falcons signed him. Everybody thinks he's going to be their starter. They didn't tell him what they were really planning, and they drafted Michael Penix anyway. And the Falcons can say as much as they want that they want to be extra safe, or they want to just plan for the future without having to try and go through a quarterback search again. But you can't give a guy like $100 million guaranteed and still draft essentially his successor. It doesn't really make sense with investing so much money in Kirk and still planning for the future that could be 3 or 4 years away. And by that time, Michael Penix might need a contract extension. So we've talked about that enough, but that's really where the whole problem lies, and where Kirk was almost doomed if he stayed with the Vikings. They were going to look towards the future anyway. And with the Falcons, essentially, they're doing the same thing with him now. So it's weird how it all plays out for Kirk in this situation, but Shots Below the Belt says Kirk Cochains is a phenomenal quarterback. The Atlanta Falcons had to draft a quarterback. They're going to average 10 wins in 2 seasons, so that messes up their draft spot in the next 2 years. Why not draft a quarterback now? I mean, yes, I see what you're saying. Kirk is a phenomenal quarterback and everything. They're going to average 10 wins, in 2 seasons. They're going to be great. But right now, drafting a quarterback, again, it seems to me that the issue with me is the money, right? If you think, Kirk is a great quarterback, but they're going to be all right, basically. They're going to be average to good, pretty good over the next 2 seasons. Yes, you could draft a quarterback after that, especially with Kirk coming off of that severe Achilles injury, right? That makes sense, but at the same time, if that is your plan, and that isn't a bad plan, I can see the logic behind that. I think still you're overpaying by giving Kirk 4 years, $180 million, and guaranteeing him $100 million at that. I mean, you could do it. The Falcons did it. If their plan is only to have Kirk really for 2 years, that's fine. But again, as a fan, I'm not an Atlanta Falcons fan, but if I were, I would think that's a little bit weird to invest so much in Kirk if we're really only planning on keeping him, making him the starter for 2 years. To give him $100 million guaranteed, it's not a waste, but it just seems like it could have been a little too much to give Kirk at this point in time if you're really not feeling that he could go longer than 2 or 3 seasons. But that's just me. Signing Cousins automatically makes the Falcons the favorite to win the NFC South. I agree with that. That's fully right. That's correct. I think they are the favorite probably, even though the Bucs did just win it. They were 9-8, so it's not like they're a team that you could put all your chips into and think that they're gonna run the table or run that division again. The Falcons probably are more talented than they are right now with Kirk Cousins, but if you really believe that and you really believe Kirk is the option going forward, just keep Kirk and write it out with him. Yeah, it could go terribly wrong, but with that being, in your mind, with that being a thought, maybe you just don't offer him that much. And does that change and sway Kirk Cousins' decision on signing with the Falcons? And maybe the Falcons offered him this money to make sure that they got their quarterback, at least for right now. That's a possibility, and that's something I can see, but we're getting into hypotheticals now. Could this affect Kirk's decision of signing with the Falcons if you didn't offer that much? Yes and no. We'll never know. It's already done. It's signed. It's already over with. But, I just have my doubts about it, especially with Michael Penix being more of an older rookie. I just don't want it to be a situation where Kirk actually surprises everybody. He plays very good, longer than people expect. You can't bench him. And then you don't have Michael Penix really giving him enough time to prove that he is that next quarterback. Because the worst case scenario will be if Kirk eventually, stops being Kirk and playing at the level that he's at, and you don't really have enough time to evaluate Michael Penix and throw him in there. Ideally, it could happen like Jordan Love. That's the best case scenario, but the worst is that he's just not ready. He hasn't had enough time to really develop playing real games, and then you're in a real situation where you spend a high draft pick on Michael Penix, Kirk is not at the level you want to anymore, and then you're kind of stuck. But that's down the line. That's where it could end up. We'll see where it goes. The Falcons, they feel pretty confident about it, so we'll just see. They're in a good spot, like you mentioned, to win this year's division, so that's where they'll start, and we'll see where it goes from there. But interesting how Kirk mentioned how it all broke down there with the Minnesota Vikings, that I wanted to bring it up on today's show. But we'll wrap it up there. We'll leave it there at this point in time. And with that, we're going to move on to that previous topic that I mentioned. We're going to talk about James Bradberry suggesting that he move to safety this year in 2024 to show his value to the Philadelphia Eagles. And also coming up, we're going to talk about more of the rankings on the NFL Network's top 100 player rankings, this time looking at 40 through 31, giving my thoughts on it to end the show. So we'll be right back after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here on the show to move into our next segment here, sticking in the NFC, looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, and specifically one of the downsides of last year was the secondary, and even more specifically, James Bradberry unfortunately was on the wrong end of a lot of Philadelphia fans' criticism last year because of an underwhelming just entire 2023 season with the performances, the stats, and just the way he looked out there in terms of coverage. Opposite of Darius Slay, it's a great thing and a bad thing because automatically you're compared to Darius Slay. Darius is still playing at a great level. People are confident in Darius and how he really shuts down opposing wide receivers. But on the downside of it, while it's great that you have that as another option as a secondary, it's a bad thing if you're the other guy and you're not holding up your end of the bargain. Then it becomes even more amplified, and that's sort of what happened here with James Bradberry. And off the bat of that, in the NFL draft this year, the Eagles right away make it very clear that they don't want that to happen again, and they draft Quinyon Mitchell, arguably the best defensive back in this year's draft, and they double down and sign another secondary player in Cooper DeJean in the second round. So the Eagles make it pretty obvious that they don't want that to be the case going forward in 2024, and it leaves Bradberry in a weird spot because he still has 2 years remaining on a 3-year, $38 million deal that he got last season, and he got that after playing a great year with the Philadelphia Eagles. They extended him, and then what you don't want to happen is that next year, in a year that you kind of want to prove that they did a great job by extending you, that you earned this deal, You play pretty poorly, you play pretty bad. But because of that, Anthony Manzano says, does it scare you that Mitchell has way too much development? That Mitchell has way too much development. I don't think so. Just because I think Quinyon Mitchell is at a spot right now where I don't think he needs too much development right now. That the Eagles have to worry about him, not being ready by the time 2024 starts. I've been following the Eagles training camp a little bit, and a lot of people have made a lot of noise about him showing up in one-on-one drills with A.J. Brown, and that's, it's still July, but I think that's a good sign. It's only going to make him better with A.J. Brown being one of the best receivers in the NFL. I don't think development will be too much of a problem. I think he is pretty much as developed as you would like because he was a senior, so he has that little bit more of experience heading into the NFL, and I don't think it'll be a problem right now for him too much. You continue on by saying, because he has way too much gaps in his game that I saw coming out of college. Yeah, I mean, college players and then transitioning to NFL players, there's always going to be that gap. There's always going to be that doubt and that learning curve, obviously. But in terms of other corners and other options that they have at that point in time, you have Kelly Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers coming back, and the way Darius Slade plays, he's going to obviously start, and the way James Bradbury plays, you almost don't have an option almost. I don't think starting James Bradbury again would have been a great situation for the Eagles just because the fans, I don't think, would have really liked it. So with Quinyon Mitchell compared to Terrion Arnold, I think it was 1A and 1B in terms of who was the best corner in that draft. So with Quinyon also showing you great things already in training camp, I think that it almost leaves you in a good spot where you feel comfortable starting him because we are only in July and he's going to get better by the time that regular season starts. And then by that time, I'm not expecting him to be an all-pro right in September. This is a long, drawn-out thing, and by the time the games really do matter in the playoffs, I think giving him this exposure will certainly be something that the Eagles are really going to benefit from. But it starts with him starting right away, and I think that'll be the case in September when they play that first game against the Packers down in Brazil. But Bradbury, where does that leave Bradbury, right? Where is his situation going to go from here? Well, it was reported back at the start of training camp that he has been getting some reps at safety, and that immediately, sounded the alarms to everybody that, this is just a last resort by Bradbury, by the Eagles potentially, to just try and keep Bradbury because they can move on from him because they just gave him that extension. But James Bradbury came out and said that, basically clearing it up, that he was the one that suggested switching to safety, not the Eagles suggesting him just to keep him, to kind of mask that contract that they gave him, and then him having played bad on it, not just as a resort to kind of, prove that they didn't make a mistake. James Bradbury was the one that suggested this change, and on that topic, he said, I try to be adaptable. I'm on the team right now, so while I'm on the team, I want to find a role on this team, and I feel like I'm a versatile player. Then I'm going to have a role, and like I said, from that point on, if you look at the situation in terms of depth and where he could have the most, opportunities to play, just going back to your question, Anthony, at corner, it's completely loaded right now with Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, Kelly Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers. 5 guys are already there before I even mentioned James Bradbury. The way that he finished last year, now coming into this year, you have 5 other options that you could essentially try before you get to James Bradbury. Younger, arguably hungrier options at that. So, looking at this whole situation, James Bradbury obviously not heading into this year with too much leverage to play off of after disappointing in 2023. You look at safety then, and you only really have C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, and Cooper DeJean basically to compete with, and I don't think it's a bad opportunity or a bad experience for the Eagles to at least try it out, for James Bradbury to at least give it a shot, basically because you'll have more opportunities at safety, and with that, it becomes very versatile, very creative that you could become with James Bradbury playing safety, because he's played corner all his career, and by playing, safety, he's able to apply better cover skills at that position than you would typically have, play nickel, be in dime packages, and all of that sort of stuff I think can make this secondary a lot more exciting, a lot more unpredictable, which could only benefit them if James Bradberry is lining up at different spots. So maybe they find something, a diamond in the rough here with James Bradberry, ideally. But again, just off of last year, talking about Bradberry on the outside as a typical corner, he gave up 9 touchdowns last year, and that's not something that you could kind of just throw out there again and have James Bradberry line up on the outside again, and just think something could change. You'd hope that it will change, but 9 touchdowns is a lot that you give up, and compared to Darius Slay, it's a lot louder at times because of that. So I think this is a good option right now, and James Bradberry continued on by saying, right now my thought process was to just try to be a valuable piece to this team, and I think that's the right mindset to have right now for Bradberry, because, you're at a point where you're a little bit vulnerable in a spot where you can demand to be the starting corner because you haven't performed like a starting corner. So to have this mindset that, all right, I'm just going to go out there and try to be a helpful piece to this team, kind of show my value, show my versatility, and maybe I find an area on dime packages, nickel packages, or maybe on special teams or something like that, with how important it's going to be in 2024. Then that way you can stay on the team and show your value in other areas, not just at corner, where it's a great thing if you're very good at it, but it also could be a negative if you can't offer anything else off of that. And it's a low risk, situation for the Eagles, because instead of just flat out cutting him and getting rid of him this year, and having to use $4 million in dead money, it's a low-risk scenario. Keep him on the team. Maybe he's not starting at safety right away or anything like that, but having the depth there over a long season never hurts for an NFL team. And James Bradberry, maybe he surprises you. It doesn't hurt to at least give him that chance. And we're talking about an all-pro player just 2 seasons ago, so it's hard to believe that that's just completely gone. It can be, but you don't lose anything by at least trying him out at a different position, and maybe it sparks something else, a revival of some sort of James Bradberry back there in the secondary. But if he doesn't make the team, worst case scenario for him, he does, provide this next level of versatility maybe for another team that does see his value and they sign him somewhere else. So I don't see any problem with him doing this. I don't see any problem with the Eagles at least giving it a shot. The depth is always a good spot for the Eagles and for James Bradberry. If he can offer that, I think he'll be in a good spot with the Eagles. We'll see how it all plays out. There's always going to be injuries. You don't hope for it, but that's just what happens over the course of an NFL season. Reed Blankenship could get hurt. C.J. Gardner-Johnson could get hurt. And then maybe it's not for a long time, maybe a game or two, but you have James Bradberry there, who's an experienced secondary player that can hopefully offer you something in a new position. He's going to try and learn it because he hasn't played it since high school, so he's got to knock the dust off a little bit. But again, I don't see any problem with the Eagles trying this out. Maybe next year they could try, if it doesn't work out at all, move on from him because he doesn't have any more guaranteed money left on that contract. So that's next year. But right now, I don't see any problems with it. Let me know what you guys think. Is this something that can be a problem? Do you guys feel like the Eagles should do this going forward? Leave your guys' thoughts in the chat box or in the comment section after this video. But we have one more thing to talk about, giving my overall reactions on the recent NFL Top 100 player rankings. We're going to look at players ranked 40 through 31 and just give my thoughts on it, why the NFL Network decided to rank these players there, or why the players did overall in these player rankings. Just my overall thoughts to conclude this episode. That is coming up right after this break, so don't go anywhere. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment on today's show, just to go over my basic reactions and just thoughts on some more of the top 100 player rankings that have been dropping. This week we'll conclude the NFL Network's, rankings of these players. I think it'll be tomorrow or on Friday where they come out with the final top 10. But in the meantime, I haven't touched on this list since basically it came out with players 100 through 81, just because I think those players in between there, you can it's hard to make an argument on where they should be ranked because those are some weird numbers where it's like about average, where they're ranked. It doesn't mean too much. Not to discredit it, but I feel like once you get into the 30s, the 40s, you start really getting into the players where you can have a little bit more debate here. So back on here talking about the player rankings, 40 through 31. We're going to start off with 40 and then make our way down. Here, I have it on here just to show you guys as I go through the list. Starting with number 40, Davante Adams. Then we move on to Joe Burrow at 39, which was a surprise for me. Sauce Gardner at 38 right after him. Quinnen Williams at 37 and Tua Tagovailoa at 36. And then, just to go through the whole list before I give my thoughts, at 35, we have Josh Hines Allen there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. At 34, Jordan Love, the new highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Puka Nacua at 33 after having a sensational rookie season. Another Williams brother, also playing for the New York Jets. Quincy Williams, very high at 32. And to round it off, Deron Bland at 31 after leading the NFL in interceptions. And that's the list. That is where it's at right now. And we're going to go back to 40 and talk about Davante Adams here for a second because he dropped 27 spots from his previous placement on this list from last year, and it's odd for me. It's odd for me to think 40 players better than Davante Adams. I guess the criteria to rank these players is a little bit different. Obviously, the team success has played into this because there's no way there's 40 players better than Davante Adams. He was still individually top 10 in receptions, top 15 in yards, tied for 8th in touchdowns, obviously. And because the wide receiver position is so dependent on a lot of other things, the offensive line, the scheme, and the quarterback, essentially, it's hard to put up the numbers that Davante Adams you'd think and expect him to have with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, obviously. But that wasn't the case. Obviously, it's out of his control, but I just thought 40 was a little bit low for Davante because just based on resume, legacy, if you want to use that word, to me Davante should probably be at least in the 20s in my opinion. That's where he was last year, and I guess the team success is very heavy on how they rank these players just based on stats and how he's played, but the fact that he's getting maybe a little bit older, I don't think that really matters too much. He is still arguably a top 3, top 4 receiver in the game, so that one raised my antenna a little bit. At 40 was a little bit weird. But then you get to Joe Burrow and how much he dropped. You can kind of understand it a little bit because last year he was number 6 and now he drops 33 spots. Just basically because he wasn't healthy enough at all this year. He had a great run of games. I think it was a 5-week span where he was just fantastic for the Bengals. It looked like they were going to make that late season push to make the playoffs, but then he hurts his wrist and it all goes downhill from there. But again, I can understand why the injury, played into this, but you could have thrown him a little bit more of a bone here, I think, because, it is Joe Burrow now. I think he's done enough when he's healthy, but I guess on the other side, these health concerns are starting to build up. But 39 seemed a little low for me for Joe Burrow. Then you get into Sauce Gardner, and again, I think it's a little low because when we talked about ESPN's top defensive back rankings, Sauce Gardner was 3rd on that list, and arguably, for a lot of people, he could be number 1 on that list. And for a top 3 defensive back to be at 38, I think that's not doing the position justice overall because, again, the stats don't pop up because nobody really throws it to Sauce Gardner. And based on who he is as a player, I think with the respect that I think the defensive back position should have, he should probably be in the 20s in my opinion. He dropped 15 spots, so last year he was 23. if my math is correct. Apologies if it's not. But again, it's weird because he's a top 3 defensive back. But right now, the production, it's hard to measure for him at this point because of the position that he plays. But again, I felt it was a little low, and that means that Pat Surtain and Denzel Ward are probably going to be in the teens right now. And to say that that's that big of a gap, I don't think that's accurate either. So the 3 players already that I mentioned were a little low for me. But then you get into Quinnen Williams, and he's at number 37. After not making the list last year, it's pretty. I think it's a good spot for Quinnen. He is one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. Kind of getting that notoriety this past year and even the year before that, and now heading into this year, I think it's a great year with the circumstances that the Jets face now with an established defense. Aaron Rodgers hopefully playing the majority of the games. I think he can have a real opportunity to shine and be one of the best players at his position, and 37 seems like a good starting point for me. I didn't really have too much of a problem there. The first Williams brother that we're going to talk about, and then to round out this part of the list, 36 we have Tua Tagovailoa, and it's odd with Tua just because he jumped up a lot really from last year, from 82 up to 36, and he is one of the highest paid quarterbacks right now. So it is deserved, I think, this jump based on the stats that he had, the production that he had, and overall the regular season that he had with how well he played and healthy he was. I think there's a good spot for him overall. And for anybody that thinks that the regular season shouldn't play too much into it, Dak hasn't been ranked yet, and he's going to be in the teens also at least. So they were right there neck and neck in terms of production and stats, and there's still a pretty big gap between them, at least 20 to 18 spots. So, that's kind of my rebuttal to that for anybody thinking this might be too high, thinking he's only a regular season quarterback. Dak, not too much more successful in the playoffs, and he's going to be in the teens, and he's been in the NFL longer. So I think there's a good jump for Tua. I think 36 isn't too high at all for him after the year that he had, one of the highest paid quarterbacks. Hopefully he jumps up a little bit more to validate that contract, but that's where he's at. Then to jump here to the next part of the list, just to go quickly through it, Josh Hines Allen at 35, after missing out last year on the list and making it this year and jumping all the way into spot number 35. He was in a prove-it year, so he had to really ball out, and he did exactly that. I think this is another great spot for him after he had 17.5 sacks, which was second in the NFL only to TJ Watt. To fit him in here at 35 and make his presence known now as one of the best edge rushers, hopefully he can continue it and be a little bit more consistent. But that was a great way to validate this contract that he did earn this offseason. So I didn't have any problems with him being 35. Jordan Love at 34. Again, the first time on the list for him at 34. Not too much of an issue. He is the highest paid quarterback right now. So if he's starting at 34 and, the standards that come, at least to me, with being the highest paid quarterback, he should climb next year if this year hopefully is a better year for him and the Packers overall. That's the expectation for me now. So there's a good starting spot. I don't really have an issue with him starting here based on surpassing everyone's expectations last year, but now I'm expecting him to climb a little bit more. If you're going to get paid like a top guy, you have all this hype around you, I don't think it's too much to ask already now in his second year as the starter to expect more of a jump. But no problem with him starting at 34. Then you have Puka, again, first time on the list, now heading into his second year. His historic rookie season, so some might have some problems with a rookie essentially getting placed in the top, nearly in the top 30 of all NFL players. That could cause some issues among people, but I think how much he brought to the Los Angeles Rams offense and how valuable he was to them when Cooper Kupp went down and you didn't really have anybody to look to. For him to step up like he did as such a young player and show the poise, his maturity, I think 33 isn't too high for him. But now I'm also expecting him to jump up a little bit more to build on that rookie year. It's hard for such a high standard that he set, but I think he's capable of doing that. Then you look at another Williams brother, Quincy Williams, a guy that not a lot of people talk about, honestly, but he has started to make a name for himself a little bit more. The first time on the list for him, so compared to his brother Quinnen, maybe this was a bit too high. Just a little bit. I have my doubts about it. He shouldn't drop to like 50 something, but I didn't think they'd put him this high. That's just where my doubt is. I didn't think the players, he was so highly regarded among other players, but it's good for him. You know, he made the Pro Bowl this year, or All-Pro. He was an All-Pro this year for the first time, so that kind of boosted his chances, and now more people are getting to notice him and his brother along on that New York Jets defense. And then just to close it out, Deron Bland, you know, the stats speak for themselves. The first time he made the list, he overall, with him making the list for the first time, that makes it 6 out of the 10 players in this section that are new to the top 100 list. So that's exciting to see a lot of new players kind of making the names for themselves. But Deron Bland, here to just close it out, a lot of interceptions, was very great as a shutdown corner somewhat for the Dallas Cowboys. At 31, I think, you know, it's kind of hard to keep him out of these rankings so high just because of how much he produced on the field, but not too much of a problem. It's just with a lot of these guys being first-timers on this list, now I'm looking to see how they respond to that, sort of validating the praise that they got from their peers now in another sort of prove-it year for Josh Hines-Allen, for Jordan Love, for Tua, for Puka, all these guys that are making the list now as first-timers. The expectations are now there. I'm hoping that all of them meet it in 2024, but that does it for the rankings. If you guys have any disagreements with them, please let me know in the comment section of this video. But for right now, we will head to the end of this show. That'll wrap it up. That will do it for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as making sure to follow the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of this show, check out both YouTube channels where there's more NFL content in different forms of media on both of the YouTube channels for you guys to enjoy and delve into. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions and conversations around NFL storylines going on right now with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Again, thank you guys for joining me. I hope to see you guys all with me again back here tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.